Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you. My name is Joe McFadden, and I'm an extremely grateful alcoholic. And it's wonderful to be here. I've heard a lot about Jackson, Mississippi, and the sobriety here, and let me tell you, sobriety is alive and well in Jackson, Mississippi. I'll tell you, I sat around and visited with a lot of y'all out here in the hospitality and over here with the pretty girls from the treatment center and lots of the old timers, and I got to say this is the highest compliment that a low-bottom drunk like me can present. I would have drank out of the same whiskey bottle with you. Now, that's a camaraderie that isn't in the big book, but let me tell you, that's a compliment. My sobriety date is June 14, 1993. I am extremely lit up and grateful alcoholic. I am not indicative. The person you see here tonight standing behind the podium is not indicative of the person that was brought to you. Over 20 years ago. The person that was brought to you was awarded the state of Texas MHMR program. That stands for Mental Health, Mental Retardation. Wait till you get to the part where I have cancer and almost die. You'll love that one. No, I'm just joking. No, I was a low-bottom drunk. You know, there's a part in the big book that says, lack of power is our dilemma. When I read that, I said, oh my God. You know, I'll tell you why. When I was in the committed to the Texas State Insane Asylum for 81 days, they knew that lack of power was my dilemma, and they gave me shock treatment. So I didn't know what you people had up your sleeves when I read page 45, lack of power is my dilemma. But when I came in here, I weighed 370 pounds. I was court-ordered to take 14 pills a day to sedate the intensity of my emotions. I was living in Section 8 housing. I couldn't work. I was on Social Security disability, receiving $400 a month almost. I was living in a car waiting for Section 8 housing so that I could get in there. When I walked into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous, you could smell the medication oozing from my pores. And you people looked at me, and you didn't care what my professional diagnosis was. You believe more in the power of the 12 steps and the access that through those 12 steps can bring us than any professional diagnosis I had. And for that, let me tell you something. I owe you my life. I was called at the last minute because Iron Mike, a very good friend of mine, another fellow Texan, was scheduled to talk, and he couldn't come tonight. So they called. And I do this every once in a while, and I had a weekend free after going out talking for several weeks in a row, and I was going to spend it. But let me tell you something. If I'm asked to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous, the answer, if it's free, is yes. I will never say no. How could I dare say no to a program that has done so much for me? There's a part in the big book that talks about self-loathing. I didn't know what that big word meant. That meant extreme contempt, disgust, and hatred for oneself. And I knew what that was more than anything in the world. I read the big book for the first time, and I read something. It said, in the doctor's opinion, it talked about 6 things. It said, feeling restless, irritable, discontented. It said, we felt like we were maladjusted to life, outright mental defect, and full flight from reality. And the 12 and 12 nailed me even more. It said that even though we're no longer drinking, we still suffer the pangs of anxious apartness. And I'm going to tell you when I related to that the most. I related to that the most when I was 9 years old and the first time I tried to hang myself. You see, I am a guy, and I want to make a point here. I am a guy who come from a horrific childhood. I am a guy who has suffered some of the most worst betrayals that could ever happen. And the reason I bring that up, because there'll be some women here and there'll be some men here. and need to hear this because I needed to hear it. That doesn't make me an alcoholic. You see, I always looked for a reason to make me an alcoholic. And I always thought it was other people, other places, other things that made me an alcoholic. And I want to get in tonight, and I want to talk to two people tonight. And the two people I want to talk to tonight are the very same two people that I have been in Alcoholics Anonymous, sitting out there listening to a speaker. And the two people I want to speak to tonight is the newcomers. The people who are here have been in and out treatment center, been to them, been in and out of jails, been in and out of detoxes, been in and out of state hospitals, and they're coming to AA again. Why am I even wasting my time? I'm not going to get sober. I wish I could. I'm not like those people. I stop drinking, I get squirrely, and I feel worse. I have to drink. And then I want to talk, and I don't know if AA is going to work for me. What am I even doing here? I ain't got anywhere else to go. I get 3 hots and a cot, and when I get out, I know what's going to do. I'm going to do the same thing that I've always done. I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to take my medicine. I'm going to drink no matter what. My drug of choice is, well, what do you got? That's the first person I want to talk to tonight, because that's who I was. Second person I want to talk to is a person out here who has time. This is an old-timers convention, and I am lit up about this. I have never spoken at an old-timers convention. I spoke at an old-timers banquet or dinner, but I've never spoken at an old-timers conference, and I just talked to my sponsor. And by the way, my sponsor and my grand sponsor celebrated birthdays yesterday. My sponsor is Bob D. out of Las Vegas. He celebrated 35 years, and he was at his sponsor, Clancy I, and Clancy had 55 years sober. You see, this program works. The most important thing to me is that I remain sponsorable. The most important thing to me is that I'm transparent. The most important thing to me is that I have spiritual integrity. And that doesn't mean that I get up here and say, hey, I quit drinking and life is perfect. Now, back to the second person I want to talk to. There's somebody out here who may have decades of sobriety, who is coming on, and they're sitting out there and they're saying, my God, the lights went out in Alcoholics Anonymous for me. I'm going to meetings, I'm sober, and I tell people work steps and everything, but I am dying on the inside. My checking account is maybe $300, $400, or $1,000 overdrawn. My wife hates me. My children are messing up. I'm going to meetings, and it's like there's an invisible wall between me and the happy, joyous, free newcomer that I'm getting sick of. I'm so jealous of him. And it's pink cloud. I know what it's like. I know what that's like because I was there. And I want to talk tonight, I want to talk to the newcomer, and I want to talk to the person who's facing the dreaded second surrender. Before I get into my story, there's a couple things I want to tell you. I want to tell you that just because I'm a circuit speaker or I come and I speak at conventions, I don't want you to think I get paid for this. The highest you can get up in sobriety is sober. I'm not an expert. I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a theologian, I am not a historian on Alcoholics Anonymous. What I am, good, bad, or otherwise, I'm an example that no matter how far down that scale you have gone, the grace of God is big enough to pull you up. In the third step, it says, take away my difficulties. See, it doesn't say take away God's difficulties. Switch to the winning side. Be like Italy in World War II. Switch to the winning side. See, it says in the third step, take away my difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness of what you can do. You know, I was asked tonight at dinner, someone asked, do you get nervous before you speak? And I said, no, I don't. And I'll tell you why. I know who I am and what I am. I am nothing. You see, I used to walk into bars and I thought I was something. And I walked in there, but I knew you people knew I was nothing. I go to a lot of conferences and I speak, and I walk into conferences and people come up to me and they think I'm something, but I know I'm nothing, and this is the best way that it could be. The definition of humility is the recognition of the allness of God and the nothingness of self. I know I'm nothing, but I know that grace of God. They ask me, how are you doing today? I say, slightly above excellent. Why am I doing slightly above excellent? I get out of the way. You see, I ask God for more. And the longer I'm sober, I ask God for more, and I ask Him quicker. And I expect less out of myself and more out of God. You see, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, this wonderful textbook we have that was divinely inspired. It says the main purpose of this book is to find a power that can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. So what's my job and what's God's job? Well, it's very simple. My job is to try. God's job is to do for me what I can't do for myself. It's pretty simple. Sometimes I need to dummy down. But they asked me, do you get nervous? And I said, no, and I'll tell you why. What I do is I say a prayer, and I'm going to share the prayer with you. And I always say this, usually when I'm sitting over there waiting to come up here. And what it was a prayer. I don't know the history. I Googled it. I can't find it. My sponsor taught it to me. And I say it, and it's been a staple of my sobriety. The person that I'm told who wrote it was a quadriplegic that eventually became a saint. And it's called I Am the Place. It's the I Am the Place prayer. It's, I am the place where God shines through. He and I are one, not two. I need not worry, fret, or plan. He wants me where and as I am. And if I be relaxed and free, He will carry out His plan through me. Amen. You see, I gotta say something. I hope to God I never get the degree of smug arrogance that just because I go out and I do this, and just because I've got over 20 years sober, and just because God's been good to me, that I deserve what I got. You see, have you guys ever heard, well, he had a slip? Of course, everybody's heard that. Well, where did that come from? Well, I'm going to tell you where it came from. Bill Wilson used to have meetings, about 3 meetings or so a week at 182 Clinton Street at his apartment up in New York. And one time a guy didn't show up for 2 meetings. In the 3rd meeting, they asked, hey, what happened to Joe? That would happen to be the guy's name. They said, Bill looked at him and said he slipped. No one had ever heard that term ever before. He says, what do you mean he slipped? And Bill said he slipped from the grace of God. You see, if you're new here, you're in a race, and you're in a race for your life. Take this program very seriously. Don't take yourself seriously. Take this program really seriously. God will not do one thing for anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous that He won't do for everybody, and I'm talking to you. He will do it for anybody, because we're dealing with spiritual principles. In the front of the 12 and 12, it says AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in nature. When if practiced, will expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to live a happily and useful whole life. If your life is not happily and usefully whole, listen up. These 12 steps, lack of power is our dilemma, but see, lack of that dilemma accesses this power. That power is what it's all about. Now, where did the word alcohol come from? It comes from a Latin word that means spirits. Now, I'm going to tell you, we're here for one thing. Every piece of AA literature points in one direction. It points to a spiritual awakening. Now, what is that spiritual awakening? It's a profound alteration to your reaction to life. It's a personality change sufficient enough to overcome alcoholism. Wow. And you're sitting out there and say, well, that's a lot of mumble jumble. What's that mean? I'm going to dummy down for you because this is what was told to me. When you went to buy your liquor, there was, now get with me on this. You went to buy your liquor, there was neon signs blinking out there that said wine and... Why in the world would a spiritual experience scare you? You've been doing it ever since you picked up your first drink. What the booze did for you immediately, this program will do for you eventually, but it's a heck of a price. Now, they read something tonight about the traditions. In the 7th tradition, there are no dues or fees. I beg to differ with that. We have the highest initiation fee in the world, and it's on page 30. Page 30 says, brief periods of recovery followed always still by worse relapse, which in time led to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Now, if you take those 4 words, they just scare me saying it. I remember those nights. Pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. That's where you know you can hustle another Tom, Dick, and Harry. You know you can get another girlfriend to let you live with her. You know all that. But here's what the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization is you can look yourself in the mirror and you aren't buying your BS and your rap anymore. That's pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And the doctor's opinion, it goes on after saying that restless, irritable, discontent. It says, we'll make the supreme sacrifice rather than to go on. And ladies and gentlemen, that means committing suicide. Now that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, if you take the first letter out of each one of those 4 words, it comes up with our initiation fee. And I am convinced that until you paid it, we can't start. Alcoholics Anonymous cannot start until you paid this initiation fee. Pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. P-A-I-D. You see, Alcoholics Anonymous starts when everything else in your life has failed. You see, I have been dipped, dunked, and sprayed. I have earnestly set my hand on the prayer and on the TV and spoke in tongues. And the only thing it did was get me thirsty. I have tried everything known to mankind. Nothing worked. I did things I never wanted to do. I became a person I never wanted to be. And I never want to forget that. And I'm just saying all this to you because I don't want you to think that the person here tonight is anything like the person that walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to paint a portrayal, and it'll be an accurate portrayal, and it'll be dirty. It'll be snotty, teary-eyed, running in your mouth, and scarred up knuckles. I have an ugly story. And that's what alcoholism is. I was out in Beverly Hills talking at a meeting once, and a guy came up and he said, you know, I enjoyed your story, sir. He says, you know, a lot of people, you don't smell much alcohol on them when they talk. You see, I figure when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, we got 2 things to talk about. We got God who heals and booze that kills. And every thought I take and every action I take is leading me to one or the other. And I want to come here and I want to let you know how horrible my life was, how I burn it to the ground, how I was busted, disgusted, and not to be trusted by anybody, how I hated me more than anyone in the world could have hated me. And if you're sitting out there and you're listening and say, man, he's kind of strong. Jesus, let's have a little fun. I understand that. It's not fun. But the first line in the 12 and 12 on step 5 says, all of AA's 12 steps asks us to take actions that go contrary to our emotional desires. They all deflate our ego. At depth, ego deflation. That's what it took for me. I had to crash and burn multiple times in sobriety and outside of sobriety when I first came in. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of share with you a little bit. The very things that brought me into Alcoholics Anonymous are the very things that nearly took me out of Alcoholics Anonymous at 14 years sobriety. You see, it says stick with the winners. Now, who are the winners? The winners are the ones in Alcoholics Anonymous who are currently doing the deal. Yesterday's winners aren't necessarily today's winners. Today's winners aren't necessarily tomorrow's winners. You can pick up this kit of spiritual tools at any time. There isn't anything. God loves you even when you're not watching. I've got this higher power that loves me. I got a God in my life who I just get up at 4:30 in the morning and I can't wait to spend time with. My higher power is the affirmative yes. He says, yeah, go for it, baby. I'm behind you. Come on. Prove me now. That's what the 12 steps are about. It's about accessing this power. It's about a design for living. And that's what I found here. So now I'm going to get to my story. I said I'm an alcoholic. Now most people say, all right, what's that? Your drinking's your problem. No, absolutely not. My grand sponsor made this perfectly clear to me. If alcohol is your problem, you cannot be an alcoholic. Now, before John comes up here and rips me off the stage and say, get out of here, I want to tell you what I mean. You see, if alcohol was your problem, all you would have to do would be go to detox and get out, and there would be no more problem. Is that right? What's page 23 tell us? It says these observations would be pointless and academic if the alcoholic didn't take the first drink, thereby setting this terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Now, what does that mean? That's so poetic and nice and everything. What's that really mean in practical terms, Joe? And I'll tell you what it meant for me. What it meant for me was this, is I'm a selfish, self-centered pig. Now, what is selfish and what is self-centered? And I didn't know what that meant. I asked my sponsor, I said, I don't know what those big words mean. And he said, Joe, selfishness is when your mindset is, I want what I want when I want it. Oh, well, that's me. And then I said, all right, well, what is self-centeredness? And he said, self-centeredness is when you want me to want what you want when you want it. And the fact that you're laughing out there tells me you can relate to that. Now, here's my point when I get to that part of my story. Why on page 62 does it say selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all our troubles? Why doesn't it say alcohol? You ever thought of that? It doesn't say alcohol. Therefore, the main problem centers in the mind rather than in his body. You see what I'm saying? Now, what is an alcoholic, and why is it important that I know I'm an alcoholic? An alcoholic is a person who can't control his drinking. And I'm going to tell you, it is so important. It is so important that we get this. Alcoholics Anonymous is for alcoholics. Alcoholics Anonymous, I did all sorts of other things, but I'm an alcoholic. Long form of the third tradition says this, is that our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Pretty cut and dry. Now, how do you know if you suffer from alcoholism? You see, I'm also allergic to oxygen, but I'm not going to tell you about how I starve for oxygen if I don't have it and I'm addicted to it, because that has nothing to do with our primary purpose. What has to do with our primary purpose is chapter 4, page 44, fourth line down. If, when you honestly want to, and there's a big qualifier, if, when you honestly want to, you find you have little or no control, or when drinking you find you cannot stop completely, you're probably an alcoholic. And the news gets worse after that, folks. If that be the case, you're suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Now, when I came in, I'm quite sure all the things that I've done, all the people I've hurt, that God wouldn't want anything. I've been dodging God for a long, long time. And they told me, Joe, you're going to have to find God or you are really, really in some trouble. And I didn't want God. I've been trying to avoid him for a long time. So I come in 1980. I didn't stay. I didn't stay because, you see, the message that I heard is just don't drink no matter what. Put the plug in the jug. Think through the drink. That ain't going to cut it for me. I needed some depth and weight. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I knew I was mentally ill. I knew I did a lot of outside issues. I knew I hated me. And I knew when I went there, you people looked like a guy that I am tonight. You looked clean cut. You looked wonderful. You had a Buick. You lived in a 3-bedroom house. You went to Sunday school with your wife. Your kids loved and worshiped you. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with me. And you know what? Not drinking was untenable. Now, I want to do something that Frank up in Lamont Oaks did in a newcomers meeting I was in once. It changed my life. And I want to share this with some of you ladies who are here tonight for the first time. Let's pretend that we are in a laboratory. And let's pretend that this is a beaker. And let's pretend we're going to make an alcoholic. Okay? So I'm taking the cap off the beaker. And we're going to put in fear. We're going to put in resentment. We're going to put in self-loathing. We're going to put in depression. We're going to put in inferiority. We're going to put in superior. Oh my God, what are we doing here? And then we're going to shake it all up. That's an alcoholic. Did we leave something out? Alcohol. Let me prove this point. I take off the lid. I pour alcohol in there. I shake it up. What do I got? Instant euphoric omnipotence. I go from blind rage to euphoric omnipotence, and you people are telling me to give that up? Are you kidding me? I'm supposed to go to these meetings and listen to these old timers with their higher power incessant, higher power nonsense telling me that God loves me. Man, I've been avoiding this guy. What happened? What happened between me then and me now? I took the steps. But it was a long way before I got there. That's the message I heard in 1980 in Chicago. I was living on the streets. I was sleeping in a car, and then they repoed my car. I slept on the bus bench. One day I wouldn't even let me in the mission because I weighed 370 pounds and I was a fighter. And they wouldn't let me in there. And I went over to a priest, and I knocked on the door. And I said, I'm full of fear. I can't be of service to anybody. I'm unhappy most of the time. I don't know what's wrong with me. And he prayed with me. And he told me, go out there and don't drink anymore. And it didn't take. And so I did the only thing I could do. That was my first real suicide attempt, and I woke up and I was in the hospital. And I got out, and they never told me I was an alcoholic. You see, I say I'm a grateful alcoholic, and why am I a grateful alcoholic? Because I know what the hell's wrong with me tonight. And if you're here tonight and you don't know what's wrong with you, I don't know if you're an alcoholic or not, but there is a process. And God is principle. God will not do a single thing for every person here that he won't do for any person here. We're dealing with spiritual principles. And so when I got out of there, I moved to San Antonio. I thought that I needed a geographic. I went to San Antonio, and I didn't drink forever, which was like 4 days. And here's where the progression of my fatal illness was, is that when I used to drink and it would be fun, 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 and then it got to be fun, fun, and then it got to be fun, and then it got to be where I couldn't put anything between me and me. And ladies and gentlemen, if there is a hell, that's hell. I can't put anything between me and me. It was like I had me, and I couldn't rip it off. And it was just me over and over and over, and I couldn't escape it. And I couldn't drink me away. So let me tell you what I did. The answer to that is what we mentioned in the supreme sacrifice in the doctor's opinion. I took 38 Xanax. I drank a half a gallon of Reuniti. I called Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. I swear. And I told them that I am committing suicide, and those old timers at Club 12 who have pushed me over the edge, they're supposed to be love and tolerance is their code. And they're mean to me. I didn't tell them I threw a chair at an old timer and tipped over a Coke machine. And I said, and when I die, I'm going to cop a plea, and I'm going to become a satanic angel, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to haunt those old timers at Club 12. And I don't remember what happened next, but I tell you what I do remember, is I woke up in the Bexar County Hospital, and I had IVs sticking down my nose, sticking down my throat, sticking in my veins. I had heart monitors. I had all these EKG things sitting all over. I had black chalk mark all over I had on this gown that wouldn't come, that much of my gap, I weighed 370 pounds, that much of my back, it just would barely cover the front. And I wake up, and I'm not dead. What a loser. I mean, my thought was, look, what a loser you are. You can't even commit suicide, and this time you really wanted to. So I did what any self-respecting alcoholic suicider would do. So I ripped the hose out of my nose. I ripped the hose out of my mouth. I ripped the IV out of my arm. I rip off all the EKG stuff, and I go over and I slam open that window, and I jump out the damn window to my death. I'm on the first floor. Y'all are sick. And that's a true story. So what happened is they come and they get me and they strap me down and they take me back in a padded van with cage on the window. And they take me back to the San Antonio State Hospital, SASH, the Texas State Insane Asylum. And I'm not in the alcohol unit. I'm in Bowie Hall. There's people, I have fellow alumnus there that are still there 20 years later. We're dealing with something very serious. We're dealing with alcohol, and I really believe we have fun and everything. We absolutely insist on enjoying life, and laughter and joyfulness really make for best usefulness. But I'm really serious about this illness of alcoholism. And I go in there, I weigh 370 pounds, I'm a ward of the state of Texas MHMR, court ordered to take 14 pills a day. I can't drink and I can't not drink. I'm feeling pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Page 152 talks about he'll be at the jumping off place, he'll wish for the end. Someday he can't think of life, living life with or with alcohol. That's where I was. And I'm in this, they give me a shot, and I wake up, and there's the kind psychiatrist, Dr. Cove, in there. And he slides open the little slit in the window, and I looked up at him. He says, "Joe, what are we going to do with you?" I don't know. I said, "Dr. Colvin, could you please give me more and stronger shock treatments? Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work for me." He says, "Joe, I believe we will again." And they gave me ECT. And let me tell you, I know what it feels like to have an untenable life. And I know what each and every one of you with your mask on smiling, I know what's really behind that. I know what that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization is. And I sat there while they wetted with cotton swab my head, and they locked my feet down on leather straps and tied them, and my arms and my torso and my thighs. And I said, "God, please let this work." That's not pretty. That's where my self-will run. Nothing worked. And they did that shock treatment, and the whole time, and about a couple days later, I was coming to where I could just, because your mind, nothing. You see the TV, but you don't know the words that are coming out, and you want to say something, and you can't make your mind. You're just sitting there and saying, "My God, look, how did this happen to you, Joe? You wanted to be a doctor. What happened?" And I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting there. And then Dr. Colvin comes. He says, Joe, there's a lady here named Kate Holy. She's a 16-year sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. She's on our staff here, and she's been reading your file. And she said that not if, but when you come back, she wants a shot at you. You see, 17 years ago, she got kicked out of the Navy for her drinking. She's an alcoholic, and she said she wants a shot with you. God bless the Kate Holies in the field of alcoholism. I went in there, and I sat down with her. And she says, "Joe, you're an alcoholic, and I don't want to hear any," and excuse me for saying this, she goes, "I don't want to hear any bullshit come out of your mouth, son. You sit down and shut up." She says, "I'm talking to you as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous." She says, "Don't you dare tell me AA doesn't work for you. You never got a sponsor. You never worked the steps. You went to meetings stoned. Don't you dare tell me it doesn't work." She goes, "You are on the edge. It may be too far gone. You may not be able to make it back. But I'm here, and by God, you're going to have a fighting chance." And she made a phone call to Jim Willis in San Antonio, Texas. And he became my sponsor. If you were at the international conference Sunday morning, there was a person they had stand up. 65,000 people had him stand up and gave him a standing ovation because he brought it there to San Antonio for the 2010. He came out to that state hospital. He got his desired chip from Bill Wilson, February 6, 1957. And he said, "Joe, I don't give a damn what your professional diagnosis is. I have seen you coming in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. You are an alcoholic. Let's treat your alcoholism and see where the rest of that stuff goes." He says, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you, if you'd like, I'm going to take you through a series of 12 surrenders known as the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what's going to happen, but it always happens. Something's going to happen that's better than what you got." He said, and these are 3 things, and I want you to know this, and I want you all to hear this. He said, you have a secret, and it's the same secret that I had. And that secret is this: you always knew you were more loving than you were ever able to demonstrate. And you knew that you wanted to be loved more than you were ever able to receive. And for that inability, you blamed other people, places, or things. And the other thing is, the third thing is, you always knew you were smarter than you were ever able to prove. And for those 3 things, your inability to express or receive them, you blamed other people, places, and things to blame it on. And he says, that's what the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous for. It's to find this power. You don't have the power to change. Power means the ability to change. You are powerless. You don't have the ability to change that. And you want to know the miracle of it? I believed him. You see, I was just so beaten down that I was willing to take actions that I didn't believe would work from somebody that I didn't really know. And that is the identification. And that's why Alcoholics Anonymous is one alcoholic relating to another alcoholic to remove those feelings of difference, to take actions that he never would have ever before, to get results he could never have gotten. I went and I took the 12 steps with Jim. He came out there. And I got to tell you this. At 5 months sober, he went to the court, and I went from a ward of the state of Texas to a ward of my sponsor. There is nothing that a single one of you could ask me for that I wouldn't freely give you. I owe Alcoholics Anonymous everything in my life. I worked the 12 steps. I had a spiritual awakening. When I got out of the state hospital after 82 days, he told me, "Joe, you go down to the intergroup and you buy your own big book. I don't want you carrying around that one that says state hospital on it." I take a bus. I go into the San Antonio intergroup, and I walk in there, and there's this beautiful purple-haired, blue-lipped lady named Lilas. She smelled like lilacs. She had on purple. She had a purple Cadillac. Her pen wrote purple. I walk in and she goes, "How you doing, Sonny?" Oh, Jesus, if you knew I just got out of the Bowie Hall, the state hospital, if you knew that about me, just give me, I said, "Jim sent me down here to buy a big book." She goes, "Oh, he told me, have a seat." And I said, "No, just let me buy the big book and get out of here." I didn't want to scare the poor lady. And she goes, "Oh, sit down." She goes, "I got to take this phone call." She's a 12-step person. She sat down. She goes, "You know, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was so ashamed of myself." She said, "You see, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous 27 years ago, I came in out of Bowie Hall at the state hospital." You see, David and I were talking. We'd never met until today. After 5 minutes with him, I knew more about him intimately than he knew, and he knew about me intimately than members of my own family who've known me my whole life. Leave your ego at the door. Ego is a separator. Leave it there and look for the similarities. Your life can change. We know who you are. You don't. You can think we're a horrible judge of character, but we see who you can become. God looks at us and He doesn't see us for what we did or what we think we are. He sees us for what He knows we are. The great reality is deep within. That's where the big book says. And it also says that that's the last place we're going to look. And it also says it's obscured by three things: pomp, calamity, and worship. What else could it be, right? So Lila, she invited me to her home for Christmas. And I went there. Isn't that something? I don't know if I would do that. You get a guy like me, and she invited me to her house. And I went over there, and I met people. And I just, you people loved me. And my life got good. I started running around with this taper named Tom, and he taped, and that's how I met James 20 years ago. And we went around to conferences, and he would pay for my hotel if I'd help him do the taping. And I would go there, and I'd travel around with him. And I met all these people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started getting good. And my life got good. Once I was at a conference, and I met Dr. Bob's son, Smitty. And he became a very good friend of mine, he and his wife, Betty. And then I had him and Bill Wilson's secretary, Nell Wing, down at my home in San Antonio for Thanksgiving. And as a result of that, they introduced me to the most beautiful, precious child of God and beautiful woman I've ever met in my life, and that's my wife, Suzanne. And you see, she's a PhD. She's something. And I never, ever in my life thought a piece of worthless flesh like me could ever have what God gave me. See, on page 100, it says, when we look back, we realize the things that came to us when we placed ourselves in God's hands. See, the things that came to us, we don't go out there and get them. They come to us. What do? A farmer doesn't grow anything. He creates a fertile environment so that growth can take place. A surgeon doesn't heal anyone. He creates a septic environment so that healing can take place. And an alcoholic creates an environment where the grace of God can come in and do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. We're in a race between that grace of God wearing off and us slipping and us claiming our spiritual awakening. I've never seen a single person in my life work the steps too fast. I've seen plenty of them die by not. So my life got great, got fantastic, and I ended up saying, you know, I've been like a full-time AA missionary, going out saving souls and everything. You know, it's time for me to get to work. And so I got a career, and I started making money, and I started doing really, really well. And I had what I call a whiskey in the milk moment. You all know what a whiskey in the milk moment was, Jim, you know. And I decided, well, if I'm doing this, if I went big balls to the wall, I could be a millionaire, and then I could retire and go around and do AA the rest of my life. Well, let me tell you, I crashed and burned. I got out of trust with the banks. Bankers got fired. Sheriffs were coming over serving papers. The bank presidents were coming over and says, what are we going to do? It was horrible. My wife hated my guts. I wouldn't go to meetings. I'd go to maybe one or two a week. If that many sponsees would call, and I'd say, oh, geez, what's he want? I'd hang up, says, oh, that loser, all he ever does is whine, all this stuff. And I got out of Alcoholics Anonymous for all intents and purposes. You see, the 12th tradition, long form, it says, this to the end, that our great blessings may never spoil us. It warns us it's going to get so good. See, and I started making money, and then all of a sudden it crashed and burned. And I said, oh, I'll double up this month. And it got bad. And you know that feeling of restless, irritable, discontented, the bedevilments on page 52, all of those, I had those sober, and I wasn't drinking. It would have been easier if I was drinking when I hit that second surrender. But you see, I said, oh my God, well, maybe I need therapy. Maybe I need to get on some medication. Maybe that's it. And my wife says, Joe, let's go down to Rule 62 in Devine, Texas, and let's start going to those old-timers meetings. My wife and I, we were going to get a divorce. I hated her, and she hated me more, and she should. My daughter, she hit a bottom. She tried to commit suicide, and she was drinking, and we'd go down to San Antonio, pick her up, and we'd drive 300 miles round trip listening to speaker tapes. And little by little, I started going to that meeting, and things started to happen. I recommitted myself to Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you're an old-timer out here, I'm saying that you do not have to live in the gray. You can get passionately present, walking hand in hand with this Creator. Working with others is the high spot of our life. If an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his life through yoga, making a lot of money, no. Through constant work and sacrifice for others, he couldn't survive the certain trials and low spots. And I was there one day, and I said, you know, I'm going here, and I'm either going to commit suicide sober, or I'm going to have to get a new sponsor, because Jim by the time was like almost 90. So I said, who do I respect more than anyone else in Alcoholics Anonymous? One name came to mind, and that was Bob Darrell. And I called Bob. And he answered. And he talked to me for an hour. And he said, Joe, what I want you to do is I want you to take from page 60 to page 63, and I want you to read selfishness, and I want you to read that you have to quit playing God. That is the agnostic toolkit there. I want you to read that and see how it's been affecting you. He says, and then what I want you to do is I want you to meet me, and I want you to do a fifth step with me. I did that for 2 weeks, and then he gave me another week, and then I had to go out, and I met him, and I did my fifth step with him. Things started happening. I had, at 14 years sober, I had 64 resentments that turned into 91 amends. I had some amends that was impossible to make. And I'm going to tell you something tonight. God's job is to do for me what I can't do for myself. My job is to put myself in a position to receive what he can do for me. Every one of those amends have been made. Let me share with you about a few of them. First one was I told you about some betrayals I suffered. There was a man who did something to me that I didn't tell because he told me if I told anybody he'd kill me. He did the same thing to my cousin, and she nearly died. And it scarred her life, and I knew she was a heroin addict walking the streets somewhere in America, and it was because I was a coward. Now, I was 9 years old, but you see, I was thinking, how am I going to make an amends to that cousin? There's a person that I dropped a dime on who's in witness protection. How am I going to make an amends to somebody in the witness protection? And the third and final one is my whole life. I never met my father. You see, my name isn't really Joe McFadden, it's Joe Baker. I never met my father, and I was told a story, and I was adopted, and I hated this man for the abuse and betrayals and the things I've happened. How am I going to find him? I've looked for him just so I could go beat him up when I was drinking and stuff. How am I going to make those amends? Bob says, I don't know, but there'll be a way. So I get busy making the amends that I can. And I get busy. He said, Joe, and by the way, why I called Bob, my two best friends, John, had 29 years sober. He had 5 car dealerships, became filthy rich, stopped going to meetings. Father's Day, 29 years sober. He gets a gun and shoots himself in the heart, sober. We got a disease, we got an illness that doesn't need for us to take a drink to kill us. Sober, he did that. My very best friend, Mike, we sobered up together. 16 years sober. Took a drink. He got a resentment, hated going to his home group. Said he's going to stay home at his ranch and record, and that was going to be his recovery. He got violent. Mona called me. I went and got him. I brought him up and put him in one of my houses. He would go out and panhandle. I'd take him to a meeting, and he would get a desire chip, and then he would go out and panhandle and get whiskey. And I went over to him and I said, Mike, you little SOB, you're going to get sober, and you're going to do it the way we did when we got sober. You know how to do it. I'm coming here. This is Friday. I took you to a Friday night meeting. I'm going out of town. And when I get back Monday morning, you're going to make up your mind because I got you on tape, and I'm friends with the city father stealing. We're going to put you in jail, and you can detox there, or you can do it the way we did when we got sober. And he looked at me. And I thought he was going to swing at me. And he patted me on the chest. I said, okay. I come back Monday morning. I open the door. Mike! I get the key and I open it up and I find Mike Whitson dead on the floor. 8 days after he took his first drink after 16 years of sobriety. Don't tell me that today it's no longer about the drink. It is always about the drink. I have had alcoholics die in my arms. I've cut them down from the ropes. We're dealing with something serious. We're also dealing with the best way of living there is in the world. This program is a design for living. My way's a design for dying. So I called Bob and I just said, I think I'm next. And so he says, what I want you to do is you got 3 days, you go out and you get yourself a CNI newcomer to get your butt to meetings, and you start sponsoring him. And I went to a meeting, and I saw a guy, and I have an eye for a newcomer, and I go up and I meet Richard, and I say, God, I said, you got a sponsor? He says, no. He goes, later on, he said, Joe, I was thinking about driving my car in a tree, and you came right out of there. You see, God's got plans. He's got it. The dice of God are always loaded. I mean, I got some dice I give to newcomers, and all sides of the dice say God. Don't try to negotiate with God. You can't horse trade with him. If he wants a horse, he'll make one. Come on. So I got Richard, and I took him to meetings all over the country. He worked the steps, and I mean, it was wonderful. One day, Richard calls me and says, man, I'm just feeling weird. And I said, you are weird. That's why you're feeling weird. And he says, no, I'm feeling. I said, you're a hypochondriac. Come on. Well, he was at his house working, and he fell out in the field. And he fell. And they took him to the hospital. He had 19 months sober. And they took him in there, and he had inoperable brain cancer. They went in there, and they called me, and I called Bob, and I said, what do I tell him? He says, well, you don't lie to him. You ask him if there's anything you need for you to do for him. And I talked to him. I said, Richard, you're coming out of here feet first. Bob told me to tell you, is there any amends, anything like that? He goes, no, Joe, I've made every one of my amends. He goes, he said, I want to hold on and get my 2-year chip. That little son of a bitch did too. And I would go up to him. He had his 2-year chip in his hand, and the day after he got his 2-year chip, they call me, you get up here now. And I go over there, and I walk in, and I say, Rich? He goes, eh. I said, I can't believe you're still sober. He goes, eh. And I said, your sponsor's here. It's okay, go home. I held his hand, and he took his last breath. And I reached over in his other hand, and I got his 2-year chip, and I got Jamie and Catherine, and I said, let's go over. This was Richard's second to the last wish. We opened up the window, and we held hands and did the serenity prayer, and I gave Jamie, his daughter, his 2-year chip. And I said, now, Richard said for you two to go home, and he had one other thing he wanted me to do. He wanted me to hold his hand. He wanted his sponsor to hold his hand to the funeral home. And I did that. And then I kissed him on the forehead, and I said, Rich, this is as far as our sponsorship goes. I got a phone call the next day because we have good AA funerals. And I got a phone call from Jamie and Catherine. They said, where Richard, when we came home, it was a cloudy day, but where Richard passed out and had that aneurysm, there was a white lightning, a light shining through the clouds right there, and there was a white dog there. I'm not making this up. We're taping it. And she goes, and we said, isn't that weird? And she goes, we go in there and we sleep in the bed, and we open the door, and the dog comes in and sleeps there at the foot of the bed, and then we get up and let it out, and we haven't seen that dog since. You see, it says in the big book in step 10, we've entered the world of the Spirit. There is one big do not in the big book, and it says, do not be discouraged. I look up the word discouraged, and it means deprived of 3 things: deprived of hope, confidence, and spirit. The world of the Spirit is full of courage, hope, and confidence. Whatever you think about you, lay it aside. What you think of me is none of my business. Can I love you just as you are is my business, and that's the marking of sobriety. Sobriety isn't I look and see where I think I ought to be and compare me where sobriety is looking and seeing where I was when I was strapped down in the Texas State Insane Asylum getting shock treatment. Sobriety is that I'm up here in Jackson, Mississippi, Friday night, talking at an old-timers convention, telling you how wonderful my life is as a result of each and every one of you. You see, I don't have a single enemy and I don't have a single friend in the world. What I've got is I've got a teacher. Some of you have taught me what not to do, and some of you continually teach me for what I want to do, what I should be doing. And I want to thank all of you for that. Today, I have a sponsor. I am sponsorable. And the most important thing in my life is that I remain sponsorable. And that means I'm spiritually transparent. I have spiritual integrity. That means when I sponsor somebody, they do exactly what I do. When I sponsor someone, we do nightlies, the disciplines of step 10 and 11. We constructively review our day. Why is that the 11th step? It says constructively review our day. I'll tell you why. Bill Wilson defined in so many words what meditation was. It's constructive imagination. Fear is destructive imagination. If God is for me, what do I have to worry about? I constructively review my day, and then I look for corrective measures. I send out a written nightly every night to my sponsor and to the guys I sponsor. We have a group. It's every Saturday morning we meet. It's called the Lost Minds of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the topic is one thing, selfishness and self-centeredness. And we go there and we talk about our noticer, how it came on. I noticed where the world's just a little bit wrong and how people are, you know what I mean? And we own up. And then we have a group text where we send it out. And we are called the Banana Bunch. We're registered as the Lost Minds group of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bastrop, Texas. But we call ourselves the Banana Bunch. Why? Because we're like a pack of bananas. You get away from the pack, you get peeled. And you know, we're staying sober. And we do not work an 11 2/3 program. When I meet with you the first time, I'm going to ask you, are you willing to go to any length for victory over alcoholism? And then I say, are you willing to do whatever it takes to get a spiritual awakening? That's page 76 and 79. And then whenever they say, well, I don't want to do my nightly, or hey, man, 4 meetings a week, you're insane. I say, well, turn to the front of the big book, your big book, because I make them write it. I say, read me. Whose handwriting is that in? Willing to go to any lengths for spiritual awakening. Willing to go victory over. Did you write that? Now, are you lying to me now, or were you lying then when you wrote it? You know, as sponsors, cunning, baffling, and powerful. And my job as a sponsor is to comfort you when you're afflicted and afflict you when you're comfortable. And I take joy in it. And our life is good. And the music of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when you're new here and you hear somebody like me, Nietzsche had a saying. He said, and those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who couldn't hear the music. You see, at 14 years, the music went out. I couldn't hear the music, and I thought you people were insane. And I made a promise when I got Bob for a sponsor, I would do whatever it takes for that music to never stop. The biggest scare in the world is that I could sober without a drink, not be able to have anything between me and me. And thanks to you people, I've been able to keep the grace of God between me and me. Now, there's something that I'm going to read to close. It takes me, I timed it. Suzanne says, for God's sakes, don't read that. And I was here tonight. And then the other thing is, I just want to say is that I believe Alcoholics Anonymous should change the name from sponsor. It's not in the big book, and I come up with a wonderful name for sponsor. Now think of this. You know, Dr. Bob was a proctologist, so it really has a historical implication, all right? Is I believe we shouldn't call them sponsors. I believe we should call them proctometrists. Now, if you get the word proctology, we all know what that means. And then optometrist, whenever my vision of life starts getting crappy, I call up my proctometrist. Doesn't that make sense? Okay. I'm going to read this, and then the other thing is, I don't want to leave this out. I never saw Kate Holy when I was in the state hospital. I never saw her again. After I got out and Willis went and signed and I became a ward of his, I never saw her. I was working at the international conference in San Antonio for GSO, and a lady came up because we had some new books that were published by GSO, and she was buying about 20 of them for a treatment center she worked at or owned or whatever. And I said, all right, and I was taking the order, writing it down, and I give her the books, and she looked at me, turned real red, turned around, and walked away. And I look over the manager at GSO, I said, man, I don't know what's going on there, Susan. She goes, I don't know, man, what'd you say? I said, I didn't say anything. I said, Jesus. I said, anyway. So about 20 minutes later, Suzanne from GSO, she comes up to me and she says, Joe, that lady wants to see you in my office in private. And I said, okay. So I walked back there. And I saw her from a distance, and I said, well, she's too old for paternity. So I walk in, and she looked me in the eye. And I started bawling. She goes, Joe, you may not remember me. And I said, Kate, I remember you. That was Kate Holy. 65,000 people. What are the odds of that one person that I hadn't seen in 17 years coming there? That was Kate Holy. The wheels of providence are always in motion. Put yourself in a position to receive the grace of God. I'm going to read this and then I'm going to sit down. And I got to tell you, this has been a phenomenal night for me. You people, this is a pocket of enthusiasm. You are so blessed to be here with some of the pillars in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's meetings you go to and nobody introduces themselves to you. I call them the frozen chosen. The people here are wonderful. You are lucky. They should, in fact, I think at the airport here. What's the name of the airport? I think they should have, like the Statue of Liberty, Bill Wilson in a flowing white robe, holding up a first edition big book that says, bring us your wretched refuse. This is the Mecca, this is the Ellis Island of Alcoholics Anonymous in the United States. And I thank you all. My grand sponsor, Clancy, read this once at a retreat we did, and I don't know where it came from, but I do know that it may touch and it will touch somebody as much as it touched me whenever he read it. We died of pneumonia in furnished rooms where they found us 3 days later when somebody complained about the smell. We died against bridge abutments, and nobody knew if it was suicide, and we probably didn't know either, except in the sense that it was always suicide. We died in hospitals, our stomachs huge, our livers distended, and there was nothing they could do. We died in cells, never knowing whether we were guilty or not. We went to priests and ministers. They gave us pledges. They told us to pray. They told us to go and sin no more, but go. We tried, and we died. We died of overdoses. We died in bed. We died in straitjackets, in the details, seeing God knows what, creeping, skittering, slithering, shuffling things. And you know what the worst thing was? The worst thing was that nobody ever believed how hard we tried. We went to doctors, and they gave us stuff to take that would make us sick when we drank, on a principle so crazy that it just might work. I guess. Or maybe they just shook their heads and sent us to spin dry detoxes or lock us up in asylums in order to keep us from hurting ourselves. And when we got out, we were hooked on the drugs they gave us. Or maybe we lied to the doctors and told them, I don't drink that much. And he says, yeah, you know, you're right. Just drink the way I do, socially. We tried and we died. We drowned in our own vomit or choked on it. Our jaws broke and are wired shut. We died playing Russian roulette and people thought we'd lost. But we knew the truth. We died under the hoofs of horses, under the wheels of vehicles, under the knives and boot heels of our brother drunks. We died in shame. And you know what was even worse was that we couldn't even believe it ourselves, that we had tried. We figured we just thought we tried, and we died believing that we hadn't tried, believing that we didn't know what it meant to try. When we were desperate enough or hopeful or deluded or embattled enough to go for help, we went to people with letters behind their names and prayed that they might have read the right books that had the right words in them, never suspecting the terrifying truth that the right words, as simple as they were, had not been written yet. We died falling off girders on high buildings because, of course, iron workers drink. Of course they do. We died with a shotgun in our mouth or jumping off a bridge, and everybody knew it was suicide. We died under the Southeast Expressway with our hands tied behind our backs and a bullet in our head because this time we disappointed the wrong people. If we were women, we died degraded because women have so much more to live up to. We tried and we died and nobody cried. And the very worst thing was that for every one of us that had died, there was another 100 of us, or another 1,000 who wished they could have died, who went to sleep praying we would not have to wake up because what we were enduring was intolerable. And we knew in our heart it wasn't ever, ever, ever going to change. One day in 1934 in a hospital room in New York City, one of us had what the book calls a transforming spiritual experience, and he said to himself, "I've got it, and I've got to share it." And he kept trying to give it away, but we couldn't hear it. We tried, he tried, and we died. We died of one last cigarette, the comfort of its glowing in the dark. We passed out, and the bed caught fire. They said we suffocated before our body burned. They said we never felt a thing. That was the best way. Maybe that we died, except sometimes we took our families with us. And the man in New York was so sure he had it, he tried to love us into sobriety. But that didn't work either. Love confuses us drunks. He tried and we still died. One after another, we got his hopes up and we broke his heart because that's what we do. And the worst thing was that every time we thought we knew what the worst thing that was going to happen, something new and worse happened. Until a day came in a hotel, and it wasn't in Rome or Jerusalem or Mecca or even Dublin or South Boston. It was in Akron, Ohio, of all places. A day came when the man from New York says, "I've got to find a drunk. I've got to because I need him more than he needs me." Now we got it. Now we got it. And the transmission line, after all those years, was open. The transmission line was open. And now we don't go to priests and we don't go to doctors and people with letters behind their names. We come to people who have been there, done that. We come to each other. We come to try, and we don't have to die, because the right words have been written in the textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.